Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Alejandro Perez, the CGI Nerd. In this video, we're going to take a look at how to do the smoke effect for the Tire Burnout sequence using Pyro FX inside of Houdini. And also, if you're interested in creating the tire that we're using for this tutorial, I have another tutorial that's popping up on a card right now that will show you exactly how to do that. So if you wanted to do that, I do have a tutorial on it. Also, if you like this type of content and you want to see more of it, please like and share this video. Also subscribe to the channel here, CGI Nerd. That helps me out a ton to be able to continue to create content like this for you guys. Now that that's all out of the way, please let's get started. Okay, to start out with, I'm going to create a little bit of geometry. And inside of here, let's create, I don't know, a box. And I'm going to use this to emit the smoke from. So, just so that I know that it's always above the ground, what I'm going to do is copy this parameter and paste relative reference here, and then multiply it by 0.5. So that way, no matter what I change this to, it will always be on the ground. It'll just be a little bit easier to work with. And now that I've done that, I am going to make it as wide as the tire. And you can make it thicker or thinner. We can adjust some settings later on, depending on how much smoke you want to be emitted or generated from here. I think maybe I will take it and just kind of do it about that size here so that it kind of looks about the size and contact area of the tire. So looking at it from here, it's pretty close. So I'm going to use this as the emitter. So this is going to be my smoke emitter geometry. There we go. And then just okay, cool. My rotation went kind of wonky. I don't know how I did that. Let's switch over to the camera here, and then that should fix it. There we go. Okay, so now that I have that emitter, I'm just going to tell it to emit smoke. I'm going to use the shelf tool here, and I am going to go to Pyro FX, and I'll use billowy smoke for my smoke type. And let's take a look at how this looks right now. So obviously it's going through the tire, which is not something that we want. So let's start off with that. Let's go out here and make the tire, make the tire a static object. And we'll have to change some settings, but at least that will kind of get us started. And you can see now it wraps around the geometry. There we go. So that is starting to look cool. Our outliner here is a mess. So I'm going to go in and clean this up a little bit, make myself a little bit more space. Okay, so now that I have that, let's look at the resize container. You can look at the Pyro. So here at the Pyro, this is kind of the size of the container, no matter, like, so the simulation will happen in here, and then the resize container is going to be much smaller as it goes through and it calculates out. You'll see that it changes size to kind of limit the calculations. So let's look at it from the camera angle, and I'm going to make it where the simulation will happen at least within the range that we can see in the camera. So going to kind of extend that, and then maybe we'll need a little bit that way, but not much, because I'm going to spin the tire this way and the smoke will go that way. And now looking at this, I want to make sure that it goes all the way off the screen. There was a little bit of the corner that was showing before. So now that I do that, we should see this smoke generating and being able to be created, and it will exist much longer in the frame. Before it was cutting off kind of around right here, and now it should go pretty much all the way up, and it is dissipating and doing other stuff, so that's pretty cool. Let's start spinning the tire. So let's lay out all of these. I just pushed L on the keyboard to lay that out, and then on the tire here, on the rotate Z, I can change that value here. So let's say we rotate it maybe 3,000 degrees, and it's gonna take like 2 seconds. Maybe I'll just do this sequence at 2 seconds. Missed. There we go. So 3,000, and then I can alt click to set a keyframe, and then at frame 1 I am just going to make it at 0. Alt click, that sets a keyframe. So now it should play through, and we are getting the tire kind of moving the smoke around. And let's look at the Pyro sim here and just play that through. So that's starting to look a lot better now, but we can make this even better right now. The smoke is, if you look at it right here, at this point it's going fast enough where it's hitting the bounding box of the resize container, so it kind of gets flat a little bit towards the top. You can see that happening right here. So let's fix that. Let's take this resize container, and right now the padding is at 0.8. Let's say we increase this to 0.2, and let's see if that's enough. And we can see that it's hitting right there still. So let's try again. Let's adjust this, and I'll make it 5. So the padding is basically going to give it room to expand and grow ahead of where the actual smoke is being generated, so that way you can see the smoke without it being affected by the box and being cut off. So that looks like it grew fast enough, and it's going to go off screen, so we can see that it is being generated pretty nicely there. And then let's take a look at the smoke when we render it, because that's going to won't be important. This is a test render that I was doing earlier. It's not what we're looking at, but let's render this, and actually let me stop that for a moment. Oops. I want to make sure that we're rendering from camera 1 and then render, so that we can see kind of what's going on. And right now it's still at 0%. Hopefully it will trigger quickly. There we go. So with the smoke, you can see when I'm rendering it right here how thin that smoke is. So it looks much thicker in the actual render, or in the viewport, but when we get into the render, it's not actually as thick as what we're viewing it here. So let's stop that for a moment. Okay, so something that we can do is we created this Mitgeo, but it also created the Pyro import, and that's checking here. That's not what I want. This is what we created. You can see that it actually added some more nodes when we created the smoke. One of the nodes here is the create density. So we can actually make some settings and adjust here. So if we needed to, we can increase the scale, and that's going to be the scale of each particle. So that's a little bit different. Particle scale, this is the okay, this is going to be the particle separation. So if we want more particles, we can decrease this. So let's say we put it at 0.1. So we should have more particles when it's created. And then I am going to adjust the scale of the density some more. So let's go to kind of a very extreme number so that we can see what that's doing. And we can see like how much thicker that smoke is actually happening now, where it was kind of opaque or transparent before. Now it is much thicker. So let's stop it here for a moment, and then let's look at that in the render view. So I'm going to set that to render, and I will pause this for a moment, and then we'll get started again. Okay, so the render's not done, but it's far enough where we can tell that it's much thicker now compared to what it was before, so we can play around with different ranges and see what we like. This scale for me is working okay right now. I can decrease it some so that it's less, but I think I like that exaggerated look right now, so I'm gonna stick with that. Let's stop this render, and so when we see it play through here, right here, oops, my mouse has been doing that a lot lately, where I can click and it goes twice. There we go. So this smoke is moving and it's looking right. The problem a little bit right now with the render is that it is not giving us any motion blur on the smoke or the wheel, so we should see this kind of blurring because it's spinning, so it doesn't look all that natural. So let's go in and go to the out section and go into mantra. I'm going to allow motion blur, and then let's render this, and I'll be back in a moment so that you can see the blur. Okay, so looking at it here, again, it's not completely rendered, but we can see in this area right here that it is blurring, and if we were to look at the smoke, it's going to be a little bit more um, blurred because of the fast motion that we have here. So that is great for what we want to do with our scene, to be able to render it. And let me simulate this all the way through, and I'll be right back in a moment, just so that you can see what the whole sequence. Actually, I want to trim the sequence a little bit. I'll probably just do 24 frames, or not 24, sorry, 48. So we have 2 seconds, and let me simulate this and I'll be right back. Okay, so I did a quick little flip book, and this is what the simulation is looking like right now. There is some big kind of voxels here that look a little weird, so we can smooth some of that out. Also, looking at the animation, the way it's going through right now, a lot of times when you get kind of this type of effect where it's kind of like scattered, it's just that it couldn't calculate what's going on. That's not always the case, but sometimes the case, so that we can actually increase some of the settings to be able to calculate for that. So let's take a look at the Pyro sim, and we can also look at some of the settings for the tire, but Pyro sim. There we go. So if we go into advanced, we can increase the substeps, and that should give us a bit better calculation. And you can already kind of see that it's changed a bit. But increasing the subsets, basically what that does is, in between every single frame, before it was only calculating once per frame, and then now as it's calculating, it's actually going to calculate 3 times per frame, so that way you get a more accurate picture of what's happening. So you can see here that part where it was very kind of diffuse and it was kind of all dotted. That is going away for the most part. It's looking a lot better than it did a moment ago. It's hitting the top there, but it's outside of our render area, so that is okay by us, because we don't need to calculate anything extra that we're not actually going to see. And let's pause the video for a moment, and then I will be right back and show you guys what this whole sequence looks like. Now we can see what the simulation looks like here, and you can see that it kind of slows down. We can try to do that, but it's still not going to be all the way. Earlier I said I did a flip book, but if you want to see what it is, it's basically this button down here. You click on it and it will go through and render a kind of sequence, and it's doing it in my other window, but it's going through and it's creating a short video sequence based off of what we see in the viewport. And once it's done, we can actually play here and we can actually see it in real time, what it's looking like. We still have a little bit of that kind of shooting. We can increase the substeps to get that completely away. I think some of that's going to be hidden with motion blur, so I'm not super worried about it. Probably with the final render, I will actually increase the substeps and calculate it out that way, but I want to change some more settings before I do that. One thing when we look at the simulation is that it is actually going through the ground, and I don't want that to happen. So let's stop this and let's create a ground plane. go to frame 1, and let's play this back, and we should see now it isn't going to be going under the ground plane. It is all going to stay above, and it should affect the simulation a little bit so that it you're going to get a bit more of a push down here at the bottom, and not just the rotation of the tire pulling all the smoke up. So I am liking that. Now with the simulation, we can also look at let's lay this down over here so that it organizes. Oops. So in the Pyro here, we have different kind of settings that we can play around with. And a lot of this is just being used there. Initial data, so if we want there to actually be like wind pushing it in a certain direction, we can actually adjust the initial data here. But in this case, we're actually driving the movement with this geometry, so I don't mind that either. The main thing to adjust is the size, which we already did by pulling and pushing this up and down. So that it changes those settings. So let's go to the Pyro Sim. And in the Pyro Sim, we have different settings here. A big one that we're going to be adjusting is the shape, but let's look over here. Buoyancy could be important with how much the smoke is going up, but let me actually adjust these first for the shape to get the simulation. So I want to get the dissipation down to 0, and that's going to basically make the smoke much thicker because it's not going to be disappearing and evaporating basically, or like getting diffused within the scene. So the overall smoke should be much stronger with as close as we're actually looking at this in this shot. I'm fine with the dissipation, but if I had a further shot away, I might want to have some dissipation so that we can actually see it disappear. So that's good. Disturbance will add some noise, and a lot of these are different ways to kind of add noise to the smoke. So let's just like crank this up so that you can see what the disturbance is doing, and hopefully we can see some change with 10. If not, we'll crank it like really high up to like 100, and you can see right now that it's because it's not playing. Okay, so there should be more kind of noise in the shape with the disturbance, and it looks like it's kind of like the smaller noise. You can add turbulence also. I'm gonna put this like maybe somewhere around there. Turbulence, let's crank this up. Then we should see that it gives us more noise. You can see a little bit wrapping up over here. A lot of this right now is being driven by the rotation, so we're getting a really kind of interesting look anyways. I'm gonna turn on some more of the settings just so that we can take a look at how that's being affected as well. There's some cool videos that kind of show you with just a pillar of smoke on what each one of these settings are doing, like from 0 to 100. And I will actually link them down in the description if you are interested in checking out those on the YouTube description, so that way you guys can see like a lot clearer idea of what it's doing. You can see that you're getting a lot more kind of defined shapes compared to what we were doing before. So I am really liking this look. Okay. And with each one of these you can actually get like specific on how the settings are working and the type of noise and how it ramps up and stuff like that. So you can play around with the specific settings for each one of them, how it is working and what type of swirl noise and stuff like that. So if we wanted like bigger swirls, we can play around with that with the turbulence and things like that. So there's a lot of details on how you can actually adjust this. So you can see increasing the swirl size, what it's doing there. I don't have any confinement on now, so that's not to worry about, but that's essentially kind of how you can control the shape, and I'm overall happy with the way it's looking. Mostly what I want to adjust is the substeps here, so I'm gonna kick it up to 5. And then also when I do that, I want to go back to the smoke emit geo that we created, and under the density I'm going to take the particle size and bring that down maybe to 0.5, and I'll bring the particle separation to 0.05. So that way there should be more particles, but they're also smaller, so we should get more refined details with the smoke simulation. And also, oops, not that one. I want to go into the Pyro sim. Oops. I want to change one more setting. I just need to find it really quick. Is it under Pyro? Division size, yeah. We can actually make the division size, the smaller we get it, the more detail we get in the simulation itself. So I'm going to put it at 0.1, and I'm going to start rendering or simulating this down here, and it will take quite a bit now compared to before, so I'm going to pause the video and we'll see you guys in a moment. Okay, so I got it to calculate about 10 frames, and that is looking good, but it is calculating really slow right now. And when I scrub through here, let me just play it at the speed that it lets me. We can see that it's not doing much right away. It's just trying to get up to the point where it actually grabs, and then once it grabs, it's looking pretty good. I'm just going to adjust I'll keep the division size where it is, where it will be quite high detail. I'm gonna jump back out and go to the smoke emitter, and under the particle size, I had it at 2 before. I'm just going to bring this back to 1, and maybe particle separation, I'm going to bring it to 0.1 and see if that helps me with the calculation times. So 0.1, There we go. And then let's go out here. Let's reset the simulation and we'll play it through. I'm gonna pause again and I'll come back when it's done and we'll take a look at it. I let this go and was calculating out for a while, maybe like about half an hour or so, and I wasn't paying attention, and we can see that I ran out of memory to be able to store all of this for it to run. But we can kind of see how much detail there is in the smoke right now. And I'm really liking the look of it here in the viewport. Let's double check in the render over here to make sure that it's actually like looking what I'm expecting it to look like. And if it is, I'm just going to send it out to render. We could cache all of this, but for a 48-second animation, I'm not going to or not 48-second, but 48-frame animation, I'm not really going to worry about caching it, although that could be useful if I wanted to be able to preview it, but also that can take up quite a bit of hard drive space. So I'm kind of interested in this smoke area. I know the wheel's going to look okay, and I just want to see that we got that billowy kind of smoke and that we're getting enough detail in here. And we can see that, yeah, it's kind of, we're getting ripples and it kind of billowing on top of each other. The lighting is casting shadows enough, and it's actually looking pretty good. So what I am going to do now is let's stop this render here for the preview. And I'll go to frame 1, go to the scene view, and I'm going to check out my render settings really quick. There we go. So I'm going to go to my mantra node, and right now it's set to render current frame, which is not what I need. I want to do a frame range, and by default it's just going to select what my range is down here. So that is great, 48 frames. I got ray tracing and allow motion blur, that's fine. I could play with the sampling, but I'm just going to leave it at its defaults right now. So I'm just going to set it up to render. I'm going to render to mplay, but you can also save it to disk if you wanted to. I'm rendering from camera 1, that's perfect. Okay, so I am going to render to mplay. And when that is done, I'll come back and show you guys. When I render template, it will bring up this window. It's just bringing up everything onto my other monitor. So there we go. So we're going to be looking at this, and it's going to go through, and then I'll play this back and show you guys what we have with the burnout smoke effect that we're working with right now. Okay, so I was rendering this. This is still the first frame. We're at about almost 2 minutes, but the issue that I'm having right now is that I didn't turn off the ground plane, and I don't want to see that in our scene. I just want to have that orange. So I'm going to interrupt my render, and I'm going to go back to the object level and take the ground plane and turn the visibility off on this. There you go. So that way we don't see it. It will still calculate for all the simulation stuff in it, but it just won't render it. So now that I have done that, I'm going to go back here and try rendering again. So once this is finished, I will come back and show you guys what the render looks like. Okay, so this is how the video turned out. I think it turned out okay. I'd probably do it in a different angle because we're looking at the motion blur. The tire's not actually shrinking, but the motion blur actually does make it look like it. So we can see kind of where the tire is right here. and you can see that there's like a little black haze, so I think that's like basically the size of the tread, and it's going kind of intermittently where you can see through it, and that's why it's kind of looking see-through like that. And we can see it at the bottom here. That's the biggest issue that I have, that it looks like it's not touching it, but it really is touching the ground. So I would probably choose a different angle than almost straight on the way I have it right now, so that way I don't see that kind of contact area, maybe more from the front or more from the back. But that's how this turned out. I hope you guys liked it. I think the smoke turned out pretty good. But anyways, if you did like it, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps me out a ton, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!